وانا فهمت. يا نعم انا فهمت. فهمت الجميع. البطال والمحتال والسياسي واللي طالب مزيد من الحريات.
Tunisia. From 143 ranking in the democracy index to number 63, it is obvious that Tunisia had improved a lot. Tunisia is the birthplace of Arab Spring as we know it. But before that, let's look at the demographic of Tunisia first. Consists of majority Arabs and Berber descendant. It is located at the northernmost country of Africa and the smallest country in Maghreb. With 98% Muslims population in the country, it became our chosen country for this project.
Who are Tunisian? They are Arabs or Berber?
Yeah, I know this question. I mean, you're like freaked out by this question because people want to define.
Yeah.
They want to define and put people in boxes, but actually Tunisians can be Arabs or Berbers, but they can also be both because they've been in contact. This population have been in contact for such a long time that they have been mixing through marriages, etc. So yeah, we can say that there are Arabs, there are Berbers, and there are people who are both.
As we know, Tunisia is the birthplace for Arab Spring. In your opinion, is there any consequences of Arab Spring that could be seen until now?
Okay, so I would like to start my reply by this. I don't believe that in the terminology of Arab Spring. Okay? It sounds like something out of an Orientalist novel, or worse than that, an Orientalist analysis. With all these Orientalist visions and exoticism. But also because it tends to impose a pattern, and although all the movement started by demanding the fall of the regimes that were in place, all of them were completely different in their demands. So some of them had progressive demands. They wanted more equal rights, they wanted employment, they wanted, access to political activity. Others were more conservative. So all of them are completely different. Although in the same region, they were completely different. So and most people, by the way, were not politically affiliated. So their demands were kind of basic human rights. But tending towards a certain capitalistic vision of society, looking at the West and that lifestyle, and a bit like the American dream, if you want, and looking at that and wanting something similar. So most people did not have real political demands, but some groups had, and those were the Islamists or the progressive parts or the communists.
Okay.
Then to answer your question, of course there are consequences that are still visible on the ground and on all levels, be it local level or national level, in administrations, in education, in employment, but most above all in terms of capacity of mobilization and free speech. Now in Tunisia there is an intense political dialogue that is happening everywhere in all platforms, really. You can see these debates on TV, for instance, where people are fighting for their ideas. I guess that Tunisians are still adapting to that and to the diversity of the political propositions that exist.
Yeah. So Tunisia went through a political transition to be a democratic country. So are they really achieve full democracy through this political transition?
Okay, this is a tricky question. But I have a question to answer that, is what is full democracy? And as you know, I mean, what democracy is, according to the original sense and meaning, and what most people think it is very different. But then, to be brief here, if we stress on political freedom and legal equality, if these are the characteristics we stress on, then I would say that I don't think that any country today could pretend to have reached full democracy.
Okay.
And this is my answer. So, and Tunisia is among them. I mean, of course, it hasn't reached full democracy.
Is Tunisia should be an Islamic state rather than a secular state, since the majority of the population are Muslims?
Okay, so again, I would like to ask, what is an Islamic state? How do we define it? And I would say that each and every person, each and every trend in Islam defines it quite differently. But then if we go to the question of Sharia, does it mean that Sharia becomes law, state law? Then that would mean constituting a class of clergymen, which would prove problematic. But then again, I do think that Islamic values, which are part of more universal values, do not depend on the state, any state, to be individually implemented or followed. Furthermore, I must say that, I mean, having lived all my life in a secular state, I believe that the state must represent all of its citizens, not only the citizens, but also those who are inhabiting the country, meaning migrants, undocumented migrants, etc., etc. And that means that even if the non-Muslims represent a very small minority, even if it is 0.0001% of the population, then the state must be able to represent them without any distinction nor discrimination. So, in my opinion, this question basically would be better answered by the Tunisians themselves, and no one should interfere in that. And for now, they are still thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even Ennahda has decided that it was a civil state, that Tunisia should be a civil state.
Yeah. So is it true women is the breadwinner in Tunisia because they got the property rights? Yeah.
Okay, I would say that maybe because men are lazy? I don't know, I'm just kidding. So, well, yes and no. Because actually, sorry about this. Property rights is just the tip of the iceberg. There has been an effort to review women's status and role in society since the 19th century. Part of it was in order to modernize Arab and Muslim societies. But if we get back to Tunisia, in the 1930s, there is a Tunisian intellectual named Tahir Haddad who developed progressive ideas about the role of women in society, and his ideas were actually rather feminist, and at the time he was attacked by the conservatives. But then he died, but then his writings and his ideas about women's role and place in society served after the independence served in the drafting of the Code of Personal Status. So the Code of Personal Status was issued in 1956, and this was under Bourguiba, who at the time was prime minister, but then he would become president. And the code tended towards equality between men and women, and it abolished many practices that discriminated against women. One of them was polygamy, although polygamy was not that prominent in Tunisia, one must say. But it also gave rights, more rights in employment, in education, in property for women. So this code today still constitutes a model for the whole region, actually. Other Arab countries still refer to that code in order to change things for women there. Yes. but I have to. I mean, a big but. Okay. Yeah. It's this doesn't mean that women enjoy total equal status or rights. Because, as you know, reform from the top doesn't always translate on the ground and in everyday life. So I guess that, but this is true for every society. I mean, the fact that we have equal rights in France doesn't mean that we are treated equally. I mean, there is still a salary gap. We are still not seen as suitable for some jobs, for instance. So yeah, I think that there is a lot to be done yet in Tunisia, but everywhere actually in the world. So yeah, this is my answer.